On a crisp autumn evening in Stockholm, November 14th, 2012, the world witnessed something that defied logic, gravity, and perhaps even reality itself. A 30-year-old Swedish striker, his ponytail flying behind him, launched his body into the air and executed a bicycle kick from over 30 yards out. The ball sailed in a perfect arc over England goalkeeper Joe Hart, who had ventured far from his goal, and nestled into the empty net. The Friends Arena erupted. Zlatan Ibrahimović had just scored one of the greatest goals in football history. But this wasn't just a goal. It was a statement, a declaration, a moment that perfectly encapsulated everything Zlatan had become. Audacious, brilliant, impossible to ignore. Yet to understand how that moment came to be, we must travel back to where it all began, to a neighborhood that most had written off, to a boy who refused to be defined by his circumstances. Chapter 1. Rosengård. The story begins on October 3rd, 1981, in Malmö, Sweden's third largest city. In a district called Rosengård, Zlatan Ibrahimović entered a world that would shape him in ways both beautiful and brutal. His father, Šefik Ibrahimović, was a Muslim from Bosnia. His mother, Jurka Gravić, was Catholic and from Croatia. In the melting pot of Rosengård, a neighborhood built as part of Sweden's ambitious Million Program housing initiative in the 1960s, their union represented the area's multicultural fabric. Rosengård was not an easy place to grow up. By the time Zlatan was old enough to understand the world around him, the district had become synonymous with poverty, social problems, and segregation. It was the kind of place that journalists would later describe as one of Sweden's roughest areas, where riots would occasionally break out, where fire brigades wouldn't enter without police escorts. The concrete housing blocks stretched endlessly, built with good intentions but creating pockets of isolation from mainstream Swedish society. But for young Zlatan, it was simply home. When Zlatan was just 2 years old, his parents divorced. The family unit fractured, and young Zlatan found himself caught between two worlds, sometimes living with his mother, sometimes with his father. His mother struggled to raise 5 children on her own. One of his half-siblings battled drug addiction. The stress of it all manifested in ways that no child should experience. His mother would sometimes hit him with a wooden spoon when he misbehaved, and the spoon would often break from the force. Food was scarce, especially at his father's house. The refrigerator was typically stocked with beer rather than groceries. Zlatan would often run to his mother's place just to eat dinner, constantly moving between two households, never quite settled, always searching for stability that never seemed to come. He described his childhood as chaotic, unstable, and at times frightening. The uncertainty of not knowing where he would sleep, what he would eat, or which parent he would be with created a deep anxiety that would fuel his drive for success years later. When his mother was arrested for handling stolen goods, social services intervened. At 9 years old, Zlatan was sent to live permanently with his father. It was a decision born of necessity, but it meant navigating his father's alcoholism and the chaos that came with it. His father worked hard during the day but struggled with his demons at night. Young Zlatan witnessed firsthand the effects of alcohol on his father's behavior and personality. It was an education in survival, in resilience, in learning to fend for himself. Young Zlatan began acting out. He shoplifted from stores in the neighborhood. He stole bikes that weren't his. He became known as a troublemaker, a kid from Rosengård who seemed destined for the same struggles that had claimed so many before him. Teachers at school saw a boy who was difficult, who didn't follow rules, who seemed to challenge authority at every turn. They didn't see, or perhaps couldn't see, the pain beneath the defiance, the scared child beneath the tough exterior. But there was something else in Rosengård. In the middle of the concrete housing projects, there was a football pitch. And on that pitch, magic happened. Football was the universal language in Rosengård. spoken fluently by kids from dozens of different backgrounds. Yugoslav immigrants, Turkish families, Somali refugees, native Swedes, all came together on that pitch. The ball didn't care where you came from or what language you spoke at home. It only cared about skill, determination, and heart. Chapter 2. The Ball and the Dream. Zlatan received his first pair of football boots at the age of 6. It was a simple gift, nothing fancy, but it changed everything. From that moment, football wasn't just a game. It was an escape, a purpose, a reason to hope. He would later describe how football meant everything in Rosengård. They played every day before school, after school, before practice, after practice. The ball was constant. It was his best friend, the one thing in his chaotic life that never let him down. In those early years, Zlatan's talent was raw but unmistakable. He was taller than the other kids, more physically imposing, but he also had touch, vision, and an instinct for where the ball would be. He could dribble past defenders with ease, his long legs carrying him forward with surprising grace. He could strike the ball with power from distance. Most importantly, he had something intangible, a confidence, an arrogance even, that made him believe he was better than everyone else on the pitch. He began playing for a local club called FBK Balkan, founded by Yugoslav immigrants who wanted to maintain their cultural identity through sport. The club became a second family for young Zlatan, a place where his Balkan heritage was celebrated rather than seen as different. Later, he alternated between Malmö BI and briefly BK, Flag, moving between clubs as his talent demanded bigger challenges. But it was clear even then that this kid had something special. His technique was raw but natural. His body moved differently than other kids. He was taller, more athletic, and possessed a kind of creativity that couldn't be taught. Coaches who worked with him during those early years remember a boy who was supremely confident in his abilities, sometimes frustratingly so. He would attempt tricks and skills that seemed beyond his years, and more often than not, he would pull them off. At the age of 14, Zlatan joined the youth academy at Malmö FF, his hometown's biggest club. It should have been a dream come true, but teenage Zlatan was conflicted, angry, and uncertain about his future. The discipline required of a professional footballer clashed with his rebellious nature. Malmö FF represented traditional Swedish football culture, organized, disciplined, team-oriented, humble. Zlatan was none of those things. He was individualistic, flashy, and unapologetically confident. The culture clash was immediate. At Malmö FF, there was an emphasis on the collective, on not standing out too much, on following the system. This ran counter to everything Zlatan was. In Rosengård, standing out was survival. Being noticed meant being respected. The Swedish concept of jantelagen, the law of Jante, which essentially says, "Don't think you're special," was alien to him. Of course, he thought he was special. He was special. Anyone who watched him play could see it. At 15, standing at a crossroads, he considered abandoning football altogether to work at the docks in Malmö. It would have been steady money, a practical choice for a kid from his background. He could earn immediately, help support himself, and stop dealing with coaches who seemed to want to change who he was. The docks would accept him as he was. Football seemed to demand he become someone else, but his coach at Malmö FF refused to let him quit. The coach saw something in Zlatan that perhaps even Zlatan couldn't see in himself. Potential greatness waiting to be unlocked. He convinced the teenager to stay, to give it more time, to believe. He told Zlatan that his talent was too special to waste, that the world needed to see what he could do with a football. It's one of those sliding door moments that change everything. Had Zlatan walked away to work at the docks, the football world would have lost one of its greatest ever players. Zlatan stayed. He trained harder. He grew physically, towering over opponents by his late teens. his body filled out, muscle building on his tall frame, giving him a physical presence that was rare for someone with his technical ability. But more importantly, his mentality began to change. He started to understand that his rough edges, his defiance, his refusal to conform, these weren't weaknesses to be corrected. They were strengths to be harnessed. The rough streets of Rosengård had given him something invaluable, an edge, a hunger, a refusal to accept defeat. He wasn't going to be just another kid from the neighborhood who never made it out. He was going to be something more. He was going to show everyone who had doubted him, everyone who had written off Rosengård, everyone who thought kids like him didn't belong at the top of Swedish football. He was going to prove them all wrong. Chapter 3. Breaking Through at Malmö. In 1996, at just 15 years old, Zlatan signed his first contract with Malmö FF. It took 3 more years before he broke into the senior squad, but when he did in 1999, he made his mark quickly. In his debut season with the first team, Malmö finished 13th in Sweden's top division and were relegated to the second tier. It was a devastating blow for the club, but it provided Zlatan with an opportunity. In the second division, he would get more playing time, more chances to develop, more opportunities to show what he could do. The following year, 2000, Zlatan helped Malmö bounce back, earning promotion to return to Allsvenskan. He was becoming a regular in the first team, his performances improving with each match. At 18 years old, he was no longer just a prospect. He was a player, contributing to his hometown club's success. Scouts from bigger clubs were starting to take notice of the tall, skillful forward from southern Sweden. During this period, an interesting offer came his way. Arsene Wenger, then building his Arsenal dynasty in England, invited 17-year-old Zlatan for a trial. Arsenal was known for nurturing young talent, for giving opportunities to players from unexpected places. Wenger had brought Patrick Vieira from Milan, Thierry Henry from Juventus, and was building a multicultural team that played beautiful football. For most young players, an invitation from Arsene Wenger would have been the opportunity of a lifetime. But Zlatan wasn't most players. His response became legendary. Zlatan doesn't do auditions. He turned down Arsenal flat, a decision that spoke volumes about his self-belief and his refusal to beg for opportunities. Years later, Wenger would recall the incident, saying he was surprised by the young player's attitude, but also somewhat impressed by his confidence. Zlatan's perspective was simple. If Arsenal wanted him, they should sign him. He wasn't going to perform like a circus animal to prove his worth. The decision could have been career suicide. What if no other big clubs came calling? What if he had just rejected his only chance to play at the highest level? But Zlatan trusted his ability. He knew that if he kept performing for Malmö, opportunities would come. And he was right. While Zlatan wasn't interested in auditions, he was interested in opportunities that recognized his worth. And soon, those opportunities came calling. Ajax Amsterdam's technical director, Leo Beenhakker, watched Zlatan play in a friendly match against Norwegian side Moss FK. He was convinced within 15 minutes this was the player Ajax needed. The Dutch club, famous for developing young talent and playing attractive football, saw in Zlatan a rare combination of size, skill, and mentality. On March 22, 2001, a deal was struck. Malmö FF would receive 80 million Swedish kroner, approximately $8.7 million, and 19-year-old Zlatan Ibrahimović would head to the Netherlands to prove himself on a bigger stage. For a kid who grew up stealing bikes in Rosengård, who had once considered working at the docks, this was validation. The world was beginning to notice what he'd always known about himself. He was destined for greatness. The transfer fee was substantial for a Swedish club and represented a massive investment by Ajax. They weren't buying a finished product. They were buying potential, raw talent that needed to be refined. But the potential was obvious. At Malmö, Zlatan had shown flashes of brilliance, moments where he looked like he belonged on a much bigger stage. Ajax was giving him that stage. Before leaving Sweden, Zlatan reflected on his journey from Rosengård to this moment. Just a few years earlier, he had been seriously considering giving up football. Now he was moving to one of Europe's most prestigious clubs, joining an academy that had produced Johan Cruyff, Marco van Basten, Dennis Bergkamp, and countless other legends. It was surreal, but it also felt right. This was where he belonged. Chapter 4: Amsterdam and the birth of Zlatan Ajax. Amsterdam in 2001 was still operating within the philosophy that had made them one of Europe's most respected clubs. Total football, technical excellence, nurturing young talent. These were the Ajax principles that had been established by Rinus Michels and Johan Cruyff decades earlier. The club believed in possession-based football, in players who were comfortable on the ball, in attacking with style and creativity. But Zlatan didn't quite fit the mold, and at first, Ajax didn't quite know what to do with him. Under manager Co Adriaanse, Zlatan received little playing time. The Dutch style emphasized quick passing, movement, and team play. Players were expected to maintain their positions within the system, to play for the collective rather than for individual glory. Zlatan was more individualistic, more physical, more different. He wanted to hold the ball, to dribble past defenders, to create moments of individual brilliance. Adriaanse wasn't sure how to integrate this tall, powerful Swedish striker into Ajax's intricate passing patterns. Zlatan grew frustrated sitting on the bench, watching matches he believed he should be playing in. He had come to Ajax to play, to develop, to prove himself in a major European league. Instead, he was watching from the sidelines, wondering if he had made a mistake leaving Malmö. The Ajax style, which looked so beautiful from the outside, felt restrictive and limiting when you didn't fit perfectly into its predetermined patterns. But then, on November 29, 2001, everything changed. Adriaanse was sacked after a poor run of results, and Ajax appointed club legend Ronald Koeman as their new manager. Koeman had been one of the greatest defenders in football history, winning the European Cup with PSV Eindhoven and Barcelona. As a player, he had been a leader, someone who imposed his personality on matches. He understood players like Zlatan, players who needed freedom within structure, who could be disciplined while still expressing their individuality. Koeman saw something in Zlatan that Adriaanse had missed. He inserted the Swedish striker into the starting lineup immediately, and Ajax's season transformed. Zlatan wasn't just playing, he was thriving. He scored crucial goals, provided assists, and brought a physical dimension to Ajax's attack that had been missing. Defenders who were comfortable dealing with Ajax's technical, smaller attackers struggled to handle Zlatan's combination of size and skill. They went on to win the 2001-02 Eredivisie title, with Zlatan contributing crucial goals and assists as the season progressed. It was his first major league title, and the feeling was intoxicating. He had proven he could succeed at a higher level, that his talent translated beyond Sweden. In the Dutch Cup final against FC Utrecht, Zlatan came on as a substitute in the 79th minute with the score tied at 2-2. The match went to extra time, and just 5 minutes into the golden goal period, Zlatan scored, securing the double for Ajax in his first season. It was a fairy tale moment, the substitute coming on to score the winner in a cup final. The next season, 2002-03, Zlatan truly began to flourish. He scored twice in his Champions League debut against French champions Lyon, announcing himself on Europe's biggest stage. These weren't tap-ins or lucky goals, they were quality finishes that showed his composure and clinical ability in front of goal. He would finish the season with 13 league goals and 5 in the Champions League as Ajax reached the quarter-finals before falling to AC Milan, the eventual winners. But it was the 2003-04 season that elevated Zlatan from promising player to genuine superstar. Despite a serious hamstring injury that sidelined him for 3 months during the winter, he returned to score spectacular goals that hinted at his extraordinary potential. An overhead kick against AZ, another overhead volley against NAC, these weren't just goals. They were works of art. They were the kind of goals that made highlight reels, that made people stop and watch replays, that made fans across Europe ask, "Who is this Zlatan?" Ajax won another Eredivisie title with Zlatan as a key contributor, his 13 league goals crucial to their success. Dutch football was taking notice. Here was a player who combined the physical attributes of a traditional striker with the technical ability of a number 10. He could hold up play, bring teammates into the game, score with his head, score with either foot, and score from distance. He was becoming a complete forward, refining his raw talent into something genuinely special. But the best, and most famous, moment of his Ajax career was still to come. A moment that would define his time in Amsterdam and give the world a glimpse of just how special Zlatan Ibrahimović could be. Chapter 5. That goal, August 22, 2004. Ajax versus NAC Breda at the Amsterdam Arena. This was Zlatan's final match before his transfer to Juventus. The atmosphere was tense. Just days earlier, he had accidentally injured Ajax teammate Rafael van der Vaart in an international match, and some Ajax fans had turned against him. Van der Vaart was beloved at Ajax, a homegrown talent who represented everything the club stood for. When Zlatan entered the pitch that day, sections of the crowd actually whistled and booed their own player, choosing Van der Vaart's side in the dispute. The injury hadn't been intentional. It was a tackle during a Sweden versus Netherlands match, the kind of challenge that happens in football. But the timing was unfortunate, and Van der Vaart's injury meant he would miss important matches. Some Ajax supporters saw it as Zlatan putting his national team before his club, prioritizing Sweden over Ajax. The boos stung, but they also ignited something in Zlatan, a determination to respond in the only way he knew how. Zlatan's response to the boos? He scored one of the greatest individual goals in football history. Receiving the ball about 30 yards from goal with a defender on his back, Zlatan controlled it with his chest, the ball dropping perfectly at his feet despite the pressure from behind. He held off his marker with pure strength, his body shielding the ball as the defender tried desperately to dispossess him. Then he turned, his first touch taking him away from the defender and into space. Another defender approached, charging at him to close down the space. Zlatan feinted left, his body movement so convincing that the defender committed fully to that direction. Then Zlatan shifted the ball right and glided past him as if he wasn't there. The defender's momentum carried him away from the play, leaving him stranded as Zlatan accelerated forward. Then another defender came, then another. One by one, like a matador toying with bulls, Zlatan danced through NAC Breda's defense. His movement was hypnotic, powerful yet graceful, direct yet unpredictable. Each touch was purposeful. The ball never left his control, never bounced too far from his feet. He was running at full speed, but the ball seemed glued to his boots. Defenders lunged at him, tried to hack him down, tried to stop his progress by any means necessary. But Zlatan kept going, his long strides eating up the ground, his balance perfect despite the challenges and grabs from desperate defenders. As he approached the penalty area with defenders swarming around him, he performed one final feint that left a defender planted to the spot. His legs crossed as he tried to change direction too quickly. The defender nearly fell over, completely deceived by Zlatan's body movement. Now, in the box, one-on-one with the goalkeeper, Zlatan calmly slotted the ball past him with his left foot. The Amsterdam arena exploded. Even those who had been booing him moments before rose to applaud, unable to resist the brilliance they had just witnessed. The goal was an instant classic, later voted Goal of the Year by Eurosport viewers. Commentators struggled to find words adequate to describe what they had seen. It wasn't just a goal, it was a statement, an artistic expression, a moment of individual genius that transcended the sport itself. Zlatan had dribbled past nearly the entire NAC Breda defense, covering approximately 50 yards while maintaining perfect control. Zlatan would finish the match with 2 goals and 4 assists in a 6-2 victory. His performance was complete, dominant, a masterclass in forward play, but it was that solo goal, that moment of pure individual brilliance, that people would never forget. It was the kind of goal that transcended sport, that reminded everyone watching why they loved football in the first place. In a team sport, here was a moment of pure individual artistry. Years later, when asked about his greatest goal, Zlatan would often cite not his famous bicycle kick against England, but this one, his final gift to Ajax, his final statement in Amsterdam. It was personal. It was his response to the boos, his way of saying goodbye, his reminder that he was something special. The fans who had jeered him at the start of the match gave him a standing ovation at the end. Zlatan Ibrahimović had arrived, and European football would never be quite the same again. In 3.5 years at Ajax, Zlatan had scored 48 goals in 110 appearances. He had won 2 Eredivisie titles and 1 KNVB Cup. He had developed from a raw talent into a refined striker who could dominate matches. Ajax had done what they did best, taken a talented youngster and molded him into a complete player. But now it was time for the next step. Time to test himself in the most tactical, most defensively sophisticated league in Europe. Juventus was calling, and Zlatan was ready. Chapter 6. The Italian Journey Begins, Juventus. In August 2004, Zlatan signed for Juventus for $16 million. The Old Lady of Turin was one of Europe's most prestigious clubs, a team that had won Serie A titles with regularity and competed consistently in the Champions League. Juventus represented Italian football royalty, with a history stretching back over a century. The black and white stripes were iconic, recognized worldwide as a symbol of excellence and success. Zlatan was joining a squad filled with Italian football royalty. Alessandro Del Piero, the club captain and icon, was still performing at a high level. David Trezeguet, the powerful French striker, was one of Serie A's most prolific goalscorers. Pavel Nedved, the tireless Czech midfielder, brought energy and creativity. Gianluigi Buffon, arguably the world's best goalkeeper, provided security at the back. This was a team built to win, filled with world-class players in every position. Playing under coach Fabio Capello, Zlatan found himself competing for playing time with club legends. Capello was a disciplinarian, a coach who demanded tactical perfection and defensive solidity. He had won Serie A titles with AC Milan and Real Madrid, and his methods were proven. But his style was rigid, structured, leaving little room for the kind of individual expression Zlatan had enjoyed at Ajax. In Capello's system, every player had a specific role, specific duties, specific responsibilities. Freedom was earned through discipline. The adjustment to Italian football was challenging. Serie A in the mid-2000s was the most defensive, most tactical league in the world. Every team sat deep. Every defender was intelligent and experienced. Every match was a chess match where one mistake could be decisive. The space that Zlatan had enjoyed in the Netherlands simply didn't exist in Italy. Defenders marked tightly, doubled up on dangerous attackers, and used every trick in the book to disrupt offensive play. In his first season, 2004-05, Zlatan scored 16 goals in Serie A, a respectable return that helped Juventus win the Scudetto. He was adapting to Italian football's tactical complexity, learning from Capello's demanding methods. The goals came in different ways: headers from crosses, finishes from through balls, strikes from distance. He was proving he could score in a league known for making strikers' lives difficult. The Juventus fans were warming to him. Here was a striker who was different from what they were used to, tall and powerful, like Trezeguet, but also skillful and creative. He could hold up play, bringing midfielders into the attack. He could drop deep to receive the ball and start attacks. And crucially, he could score the goals that won matches. In a league where 1-0 victories were common, having a striker who could find the net was invaluable. The following season, 2005-06, he added 7 more league goals as Juventus secured another title. His goal tally was lower, partly due to sharing playing time with other forwards, partly due to Capello's more defensive tactical approach. But Juventus was winning, dominating Serie A with a combination of defensive solidity and clinical finishing. They seemed unstoppable, a dynasty in the making with Zlatan as a key component. But then came the Calciopoli scandal, the match-fixing controversy that rocked Italian football to its core. In May 2006, Italian prosecutors revealed evidence that Juventus, along with several other clubs, had been influencing referee assignments for matches. Phone recordings captured Juventus officials discussing which referees they preferred for certain matches, suggesting a systematic attempt to gain competitive advantages through corruption. The investigation revealed a network of connections between club officials, referee designators, and referees themselves. Juventus, as the most successful club and the most implicated in the evidence, faced the harshest scrutiny. The sporting world watched in shock as one of football's most prestigious institutions stood accused of cheating on a massive scale. The punishment was severe. Juventus was stripped of both the 2004-05 and 2005-06 Scudetti that they had won with Zlatan. The titles were vacated, erased from the record books as if they had never existed. But worse than losing the titles was the relegation. Juventus was demoted to Serie B, Italy's second division, for the 2006-07 season. It was an unprecedented fall from grace for a club of Juventus's stature. For Zlatan and his agent Mino Raiola, the situation was unacceptable. Zlatan had joined Juventus to compete at the highest level, not to play in the second division. He was 24 years old, entering his prime years as a footballer, and Serie B was not where he needed to be. Despite attempts by Juventus management to persuade him to stay and help the club rebuild, promising him he would be the centerpiece of their return to Serie A, Zlatan was adamant. His time in Turin was over. The decision wasn't just about ambition. Zlatan felt betrayed. He had worked hard for those 2 Scudetti, had scored goals, had contributed to the team's success. Now those titles were being taken away, his achievements erased because of actions by club officials that he had no knowledge of or control over. The trophies he thought he'd won didn't exist anymore. The accomplishments he was proud of had been invalidated. A blazing argument with Juventus director Luciano Moggi, following a red card Zlatan received in a Champions League match against Bayern Munich, sealed the deal. Zlatan told Moggi he wouldn't stay, and nothing could change his mind. Moggi, one of the central figures in the Calciopoli scandal, tried to convince Zlatan that loyalty meant staying during difficult times. But Zlatan's counter-argument was simple. Where was Juventus's loyalty to him when they were cheating, potentially putting his career and achievements at risk? On August 10, 2006, Inter Milan announced they had signed Zlatan Ibrahimović for $24.8 million. The Swedish striker was staying in Italy but switching from black and white to blue and black. He was joining Juventus's rivals, a move that Juventus fans would view as treachery. But Zlatan didn't see it that way. He was simply continuing his career at the highest level, which was exactly what he had come to Italy to do, and he was about to enter the most dominant period of his career to date. At Inter Milan, everything would change. The frustrations of competing for playing time, of serving as one option among many, would disappear. At Inter, Zlatan would become the main man, the undisputed star, the player around whom everything revolved, and he would thrive in ways that would shock even those who believed in his talent. Chapter 7. Dominance in Milan, Inter years. At Inter Milan, Zlatan finally became the undisputed main man. Under coach Roberto Mancini, he was the focal point of the attack, the star around whom everything revolved. And he delivered spectacularly. From the moment he arrived in the summer of 2006, there was a sense that something special was about to happen. Inter had been close to sustained success for years, but needed that final piece, that player who could elevate them from good to great. Zlatan was that piece. In his first season, 2006-07, Zlatan scored 15 league goals as Inter won the Scudetto. Italian football was still reeling from Calciopoli, and Inter was awarded the 2005-06 title that Juventus had been stripped of, though Zlatan's arrival came after that decision. What mattered was what happened on the pitch, and on the pitch, Inter was dominant. With Juventus in Serie B and AC, Milan weakened by the scandal, Inter seized the opportunity to establish themselves as Italy's premier club. Zlatan's impact went beyond just goals. He brought a physical presence that Italian defenses struggled to handle. At 6 feet 5 inches, he could dominate in aerial duels, holding up play and bringing teammates into attacks. But unlike most tall strikers, he had the technical ability to drop deep, receive the ball to feet, and create chances for others. His passing range was excellent, his vision sharp, and his ability to bring others into play made Inter's entire attack more dangerous. Mancini built the team around Zlatan's strengths. The Italian coach understood that Zlatan needed freedom to roam, to drop deep when he wanted, to drift wide when opportunities presented themselves. But he also demanded that Zlatan work defensively, pressing opponents and tracking back when needed. It was a balance, freedom with responsibility, creativity within structure. And Zlatan responded to Mancini's trust with increasingly impressive performances. The 2007-08 season saw Zlatan improve further, netting 17 league goals as Inter claimed another championship. He was developing into a complete striker, powerful in the air, skillful with the ball at his feet, capable of both scoring and creating. His partnership with players like Adriano, the powerful Brazilian striker, and later Julio Cruz gave Inter attacking options that terrorized Serie A defenses. When teams focused on stopping Zlatan, his partners scored. When they tried to contain the others, Zlatan punished them. His goals that season came in all varieties. There were tap-ins from close range, showing his positioning and anticipation. There were powerful shots from distance, demonstrating his technique and confidence. There were headers from crosses, utilizing his height and timing. And there were moments of individual brilliance, dribbles past multiple defenders, audacious chips over goalkeepers, strikes from impossible angles. Zlatan was becoming a complete forward, capable of scoring in any situation. But it was the 2008-09 season where Zlatan reached new heights. He scored a remarkable 25 goals in 35 Serie A matches, becoming the league's top scorer. Inter won their third consecutive Scudetto with Zlatan as the undisputed star. His performances had elevated him into the conversation about the world's very best players. People were comparing him to Thierry Henry, to Didier Drogba, to the elite strikers of world football. Some even suggested he deserved consideration for the Ballon d'Or. His goal against Bologna in May 2009 exemplified his quality. Receiving the ball just inside Bologna's half, with his back to goal, Zlatan controlled it perfectly, despite pressure from behind. He turned, accelerated past one defender, then another. As he entered the penalty area, the goalkeeper rushed out. Zlatan calmly dinked the ball over him and into the net. It was a goal that showcased everything: his first touch, his dribbling, his composure, his finishing. It was the goal of a world-class striker at the peak of his powers. During these years at Inter, Zlatan worked under José Mourinho, who replaced Mancini before the 2008-09 season. The Portuguese manager saw something special in Zlatan, not just talent, but the kind of mentality and personality that could win titles. Mourinho knew how to handle big personalities, and he understood that Zlatan needed freedom to express himself within a tactical framework. He gave Zlatan that freedom while also demanding defensive work and tactical discipline. The relationship between Zlatan and Mourinho was built on mutual respect. Mourinho gave Zlatan confidence and trust. He defended him publicly, built the team around him, and extracted the best from him. In return, Zlatan gave Mourinho everything on the pitch: goals, assists, leadership, and an unshakable winning mentality. As Zlatan would later say, Mourinho was someone he would die for on the pitch. It was the kind of player-coach relationship that brings out greatness. Mourinho understood Zlatan in ways previous coaches hadn't. He recognized that Zlatan's confidence wasn't arrogance. It was armor, protection built from surviving a difficult childhood. He saw that Zlatan's sometimes prickly personality wasn't difficult. It was the personality of someone who had fought for everything he'd achieved and refused to accept disrespect. Mourinho didn't try to change Zlatan. He simply channeled that personality toward winning. Under Mourinho's guidance, Inter won the treble in the 2009-10 season. Though Zlatan had already left by then, his contributions in building that team were undeniable. The foundation that Zlatan helped establish, the winning culture he helped create, carried Inter to their greatest achievement in decades. It was bittersweet for Zlatan, proud that his former team achieved something historic, but frustrated that he wasn't there to be part of it. Zlatan won the Italian Footballer of the Year award twice during his Inter years. He was consistently included in Serie A teams of the season. He had proven beyond doubt that he belonged among football's elite. In 3 seasons at Inter, he scored 57 goals in 88 Serie A appearances, a strike rate of better than 1 goal every 2 matches in one of the world's most defensive leagues. But the Champions League remained elusive. Inter couldn't get past the knockout stages despite their domestic dominance. In the 2008-09 season, they were eliminated in the round of 16 by Manchester United. Zlatan scored in both legs, but couldn't prevent Inter from going out. Critics began suggesting that Zlatan was a flat-track bully, someone who scored against weaker teams in Serie A, but couldn't deliver in the biggest European matches. It was a criticism that would follow him throughout his career. By the summer of 2009, Zlatan had conquered Italy. He had won 3 consecutive Serie A titles. He was Serie A's top scorer. He was 27 years old, entering the absolute prime years for a footballer. But FC Barcelona came calling, and the chance to play for arguably the greatest club side ever assembled was too tempting to resist. Barcelona had just won the treble under Pep Guardiola, playing football that people called the most beautiful ever seen. Zlatan wanted to be part of that. He wanted to win the Champions League. He wanted to prove he could succeed at the absolute highest level. The transfer fee was enormous, $40 million plus Samuel Eto'o, valued at $20 million, for a total package of approximately $69 million. It made Zlatan one of the most expensive players in football history. Barcelona was investing not just in a striker, but in someone they believed could take their already incredible team to even greater heights. What nobody knew then was that this would become one of the most infamous transfers in football history, not for what Zlatan achieved, but for how spectacularly the relationship would fall apart. Chapter 8. The Barcelona Dream Becomes a Nightmare. In July 2009, Barcelona paid a king's ransom to bring Zlatan Ibrahimović to Camp Nou. The total package was worth approximately $69 million, making Zlatan one of the most expensive players in football history at that time. He was joining the treble winners, a team that had just won La Liga, the Copa del Rey, and the Champions League under Pep Guardiola. This Barcelona team was being called the greatest ever. Their tiki-taka style of football, their relentless possession, their ability to dominate matches without even allowing opponents to touch the ball was revolutionary. On paper, it was perfect. Zlatan would play alongside Lionel Messi, who had just won his first Ballon d'Or. He would combine with Xavi Hernandez, whose passing range and vision were unmatched. He would benefit from Andres Iniesta's creativity and movement. He would be supplied by Dani Alves's attacking runs from right back. The talent surrounding him was extraordinary. This was the opportunity to win the Champions League, to prove himself on the absolute biggest stage, to silence critics who said he couldn't perform in crucial European matches. He started brilliantly too. In his first 7 league games, Zlatan scored 7 goals. Barcelona fans were excited. This powerful, skillful Swedish striker seemed like the perfect complement to their intricate passing game. He could hold up play when needed, bringing Messi and others into dangerous positions. He could finish chances that Messi created. He provided a physical presence and aerial threat that Barcelona had lacked. Early on, everything seemed to be working perfectly. But beneath the surface, problems were brewing. The clash between Zlatan's personality and Pep Guardiola's philosophy would become one of football's most famous feuds. It started subtly, small tactical disagreements, different ideas about how the team should play, contrasting personalities that didn't mesh. But it would escalate into something much more serious, something that would ultimately end Zlatan's Barcelona career prematurely and create a rift that persists to this day. Zlatan was used to being the main man, the focal point of attack. At Inter, everything had run through him. At Ajax, he had been the star. Even at Juventus, despite sharing duties with other forwards, he had been a crucial player. But at Barcelona, no one was bigger than the system. And increasingly, everything ran through Messi. Guardiola began experimenting with Messi in the false 9 position, dropping deep from a central striking position to create space and confusion for defenders. It was devastatingly effective, perhaps the most dangerous tactical innovation in modern football. But Messi playing as a false 9 meant Zlatan couldn't play centrally. He was pushed wider, moved to the flanks, asked to operate in spaces that didn't suit his game. Zlatan was a number 9. A traditional striker who wanted to be in the box, attacking crosses, finishing chances, being the focal point. Playing out wide took away his strengths. It made him just another piece in Barcelona's machine, rather than a star in his own right. The first sign of trouble came at their very first meeting. Guardiola told Zlatan and the other new signings, "Remember, the players here do not come with Ferraris." It was meant to emphasize Barcelona's team-first mentality, their humility despite being the world's best. The club culture valued collective success over individual glory, modesty over ostentation. Players were expected to be humble, to avoid showing off wealth or status. It was part of what made Barcelona special. They were a team in the truest sense. Zlatan's response? He showed up to training the next day in his Ferrari. It was pure Zlatan, defiant, unapologetic, refusing to conform. He wasn't going to pretend to be modest when he'd worked his entire life, to afford luxuries like a Ferrari. He'd grown up with nothing in Rosengård. He'd earned every euro through his talent and hard work. If he wanted to drive a Ferrari, he would drive a Ferrari. Guardiola's comment struck Zlatan as sanctimonious. Who was Guardiola to tell him what car to drive? As the season progressed, the relationship between player and coach deteriorated. Guardiola, according to Zlatan, stopped speaking to him. In 6 months, they reportedly spoke only twice. Conversations were conducted through assistants, through other players, through anyone but direct communication. Zlatan felt marginalized, treated like a disturbance, an alien, rather than the $69 million star they had signed. He wasn't being coached, wasn't being developed, wasn't being utilized properly. Guardiola's perspective, though he remained more diplomatic publicly, was that Zlatan didn't fit Barcelona's style. The system demanded certain things: constant movement, quick one-touch passing, pressing from the front. Zlatan's game was different. He liked to hold the ball, to take extra touches, to impose himself physically. In Barcelona's fluid, fast-paced system, these tendencies disrupted the rhythm. What made Zlatan special at other clubs made him awkward at Barcelona. The breaking point came after Barcelona's Champions League semi-final elimination by Inter Milan, Zlatan's former club, now managed by José Mourinho. Inter knocked out Guardiola's Barcelona over 2 legs in April 2010, and it was a bitter defeat. Barcelona had been favorites, expected to retain their Champions League crown. Instead, Mourinho's tactical masterclass, parking the bus, absorbing pressure, hitting on the counter, exposed Barcelona's limitations. Zlatan played in the first leg but was dropped for the crucial second leg at Camp Nou. He watched from the bench as his former teammates eliminated his current team. After the match, in the dressing room, Guardiola stared at Zlatan. The Swedish striker, already frustrated by months of poor treatment, finally snapped. He unleashed a tirade at his coach, years of pent-up anger exploding in that moment. He called Guardiola a coward, told him to go to hell, accused him of treating him with disrespect. Other players tried to intervene, to calm the situation, but Zlatan was beyond caring. His Barcelona dream had become a nightmare, and he wanted Guardiola to know exactly how he felt. Despite the drama, Zlatan still finished the season with 16 league goals in 29 appearances and helped Barcelona win La Liga. His goal-scoring record was respectable, 21 goals in 45 appearances across all competitions. But by Barcelona's standards, by the standards of a $69 million signing, it wasn't enough. And more importantly, the relationship with Guardiola was irreparable. Everyone knew Zlatan was leaving. The only question was where he would go. By the summer of 2010, Barcelona loaned him to AC Milan with an option to buy. Zlatan left Camp Nou after just one turbulent season. For Barcelona, it was an expensive mistake. They would eventually sell him to Milan for just $24 million, a massive loss on their investment. For Zlatan, it was a painful lesson about the importance of finding the right fit, about how talent alone isn't enough if the system doesn't suit your strengths. In his autobiography, I Am Zlatan Ibrahimović, released years later, Ibrahimovic didn't hold back. He called Guardiola a spineless coward and compared him unfavorably to Mourinho. The famous quote captured everything. Mourinho is Guardiola's opposite. If Mourinho brightens up the room, Guardiola pulls down the curtains. It was a scathing indictment of Guardiola's personality and coaching style, at least as Zlatan experienced it. Another memorable line from Zlatan perfectly summarized his Barcelona experience. When you buy me, you are buying a Ferrari. If you drive a Ferrari, you put premium petrol in the tank, you hit the motorway, and you step on the gas. Guardiola filled up with diesel and went for a spin in the countryside. He should have bought a Fiat. The metaphor was perfect. Barcelona had acquired an incredible talent, but used him incorrectly, wasting both his abilities and their investment. Guardiola, for his part, remained more diplomatic publicly. In interviews, he acknowledged the relationship hadn't worked, but avoided personal attacks. He suggested that Zlatan was a great player who simply didn't fit Barcelona's system. Years later, when Zlatan and Guardiola met at a preseason friendly in New York in 2024, the tension was still palpable in their awkward greeting. Some feuds never truly end. Some wounds never fully heal. The Barcelona failure would haunt Zlatan. It was the one club where he didn't succeed, the one place where his talent wasn't enough. Critics used it as evidence that Zlatan couldn't adapt to the highest level of tactical sophistication. Supporters argued that Guardiola mismanaged him, that any coach who couldn't figure out how to use a player of Zlatan's quality was at fault. The truth probably lies somewhere in between. It was a mismatch, a poor fit, a combination of clashing personalities and incompatible playing styles. But one thing was certain: Zlatan needed to bounce back. He needed to prove that Barcelona was an aberration, not a sign of decline. He needed to show that he could still dominate at the highest level. And fortunately for him, AC Milan was ready to give him that opportunity. Chapter 9. Rossoneri redemption. AC Milan moving to AC Milan was like coming home. The Rossoneri welcomed Zlatan with open arms, and he immediately felt the difference. Here, he wasn't being asked to change who he was. Here, he wasn't being pushed to the wings to accommodate someone else. Here, he could be Zlatan, the powerful, skillful, confident striker who dominated matches through sheer force of personality and talent. He joined on loan for the 2010-11 season and made his debut in September 2010. From his very first match, it was clear that this was a different Zlatan from the frustrated figure who had left Barcelona. He was energized, motivated, hungry to prove that the Barcelona failure was a blip rather than a decline. He was playing with freedom again, with joy, with the confidence that had defined his best years at Inter and Ajax. In his first season, he scored 14 league goals in just 29 appearances and was instrumental as Milan won the Serie A title, their first Scudetto since 2004. It was Milan's first championship in 7 years, breaking Inter's streak of dominance. Zlatan had delivered just as he promised he would. He had returned to Serie A after his Barcelona disappointment and immediately won the league. It was vindication, validation, proof that he could still be the dominant force he'd been before Barcelona. The relationship was so successful that Milan made the move permanent in summer 2011, paying Barcelona $24 million to secure Zlatan's services. It was less than half what Barcelona had paid for him just 2 years earlier, representing one of the best value signings in recent football history. Milan was getting a world-class striker in his prime for a bargain price, all because Barcelona had mismanaged him so badly. The 2011-12 season became Zlatan's personal showcase. He scored an astounding 28 goals in just 32 Serie A appearances, finishing as the league's top scorer. His performances were at times breathtaking, the kind of dominance where he seemed to decide matches by sheer force of will. He scored goals of all types: headers, volleys, free kicks, tap-ins, solo efforts. He was unstoppable, unplayable, back to being the best striker in Italy and one of the best in the world. One moment stands out from his Milan years: his goal against Inter in the Derby della Madonnina on October 23, 2011. Receiving a pass just outside the penalty area, Zlatan controlled it with his chest, let the ball drop, and volleyed it past Julio Cesar into the net. It was a beautiful goal, but what came next made it legendary. After scoring, Zlatan ran toward the Inter Ultras in the Curva Nord, their hardcore support section, and made a gesture silencing them. His finger pressed against his lips. It was the ultimate statement, the former Inter hero telling his old fans that Milan was his home now, that he had moved on, that their boos meant nothing to him. The celebration caused controversy. Some saw it as disrespectful, provocative, deliberately inflammatory. Others saw it as Zlatan being Zlatan, confident, defiant, unapologetic. He was later fined by Serie A authorities for the gesture, but it didn't matter. That image of Zlatan silencing the Inter Ultras became iconic, cementing his legendary status among Milan supporters. He wasn't just a Milan player. He was theirs, fully committed to their cause. Playing under coach Massimiliano Allegri, Zlatan enjoyed the freedom to express himself while still maintaining tactical discipline. Allegri understood how to use Zlatan, giving him the central role he craved while also demanding defensive work when needed. The system was built around Zlatan's strengths: crosses into the box for his heading ability, through balls for his runs, space for his dribbling. Everything played to his advantages. In total, across his first stint at Milan from 2010 to 2012, Zlatan scored 56 goals in 85 appearances in all competitions. He won 1 Scudetto and established himself as one of the club's modern legends. The Milan fans adored him in a way Barcelona fans never had. They appreciated his personality, his confidence, his willingness to back up his words with performances. In Milan, Zlatan wasn't just tolerated, he was celebrated. His partnership with fellow forwards like Robinho, Antonio Cassano, and later Kevin Prince Boateng gave Milan multiple attacking threats. When opponents focused on stopping Zlatan, his teammates had space to operate. When they tried to contain the others, Zlatan punished them. It was the kind of balanced attack that Zlatan thrived in. He could be the star while still having quality players around him who could contribute. But by 2012, a new challenge beckoned. Paris Saint-Germain, newly wealthy thanks to Qatari investment from Qatar Sports Investments, wanted to build a super team capable of dominating France and competing in Europe. They were throwing money at the project, signing the best players available and building a squad that could challenge Europe's elite. And they wanted Zlatan Ibrahimović to lead it. The offer was financially lucrative beyond anything Zlatan had seen before. More importantly, it was a chance to build something new, to be the centerpiece of an ambitious project from its very beginning. Milan, facing financial difficulties, couldn't compete with PSG's offer. They needed to sell, and Zlatan needed a new challenge. After 2 wonderful years in Milan, it was time to move on. The Rossoneri fans were heartbroken to see him leave, but they understood. Zlatan had given them everything, had delivered a Scudetto, had provided memories they would cherish forever. Now he was heading to Paris to conquer France. Chapter 10. The King of Paris. On July 18, 2012, Zlatan signed for Paris Saint-Germain from AC Milan on a 3-year contract worth a reported $14 million per year after tax, making him one of the highest-paid players in world football. PSG was embarking on an ambitious project to become one of Europe's elite clubs, and Zlatan was the marquee signing that signaled their intent to the world. He wasn't just another player. He was the statement, the symbol, the face of PSG's transformation from domestic also-rans to French champions and European contenders. He made an immediate impact. On his debut against FC Lorient on August 11, 2012, Zlatan scored in a 2-1 victory. It was the beginning of what would become a 4-year reign as the undisputed king of French football. From the moment he arrived, PSG was different. They had signed quality players before, Thiago Silva, Javier Pastore, others, but Zlatan brought something beyond just skill. He brought a winning mentality, an expectation of excellence, a refusal to accept anything less than dominance. In his first season, 2012-13, Zlatan scored 30 goals in all competitions as PSG won Ligue 1, their first title in 19 years. The championship ended a long drought for PSG, and Zlatan was the driving force. He formed a potent partnership with Edinson Cavani, the Uruguayan striker who joined from Napoli, and Ezequiel Lavezzi in attack. The three of them terrorized French defenses with their combination of pace, power, and technical ability. Perhaps his most memorable performance that season came against Marseille in Le Classique at the Stade Vélodrome on February 24, 2013. This fixture is French football's biggest rivalry, PSG versus Marseille, Paris versus the South, decades of animosity and competition. Zlatan scored twice in a 2-2 draw, including a stunning backheel flick that showcased his audacity and skill. He also converted a free kick with typical precision. Even in a draw, Zlatan dominated the match, his presence overwhelming Marseille's defense. But this was just the beginning. The 2013-14 season saw Zlatan reach even greater heights. He scored 41 goals in all competitions, including 26 in Ligue 1, as PSG won the league again. He was named Ligue 1 Player of the Year for the second consecutive season. His performances were consistent, dominant, and at times unplayable. He scored in big matches, in small matches, in every type of situation. He was PSG's talisman, their leader, their best player by a considerable margin. In March 2014, Zlatan surpassed Carlos Bianchi's club record of 39 goals in a single season, cementing his place in PSG history. He wasn't just passing through Paris. He was rewriting the club's record books, establishing new standards, creating a legacy that would endure long after he left. Every record he broke, every milestone he reached, reinforced his status as PSG's greatest ever player. The 2014-15 season brought more of the same dominance. Zlatan scored 31 goals across all competitions as PSG secured their third consecutive title under his leadership. By now, he wasn't just PSG's best player. He was the face of the club, the personality that defined their ambition. When people thought of PSG, they thought of Zlatan. His image was on billboards across Paris. His name was chanted by fans at the Parc des Princes. He had become bigger than the club itself, which is saying something in a city as large and important as Paris. His relationship with French football was complicated. Some critics in the French media suggested that Ligue 1 was too easy for him, that he was dominating a weak league. Zlatan's response was typically defiant. He was breaking records, winning titles, and performing at the highest level. If the league was weak, it was because he made it look weak through his brilliance. He defended Ligue 1 when appropriate, but also acknowledged that his goal was Champions League glory, not just domestic domination. The Champions League remained frustrating. PSG would win their domestic competitions but struggle to advance deep into Europe's premier tournament. They reached the quarter-finals multiple times but couldn't break through to the semi-finals. For Zlatan, this was the one missing piece, Champions League glory, the trophy that had eluded him throughout his career. At Barcelona, they had been eliminated when he was there. At Inter, they couldn't get past the knockouts. Now at PSG, despite all his goals and all their talent, they kept falling short. The 2015-16 season, Zlatan's final year in Paris, was his masterpiece. He scored 50 goals in 51 competitive matches, a ratio that even his incredibly high standards had rarely reached. It was an extraordinary achievement, the kind of season that defines careers. In Ligue 1 alone, he netted an astounding 38 goals in 31 matches, breaking the club's single-season scoring record and finishing as the league's top scorer for the third time in 4 seasons. On October 4, 2015, Zlatan scored twice against Marseille to become PSG's all-time leading scorer, surpassing Pauleta's previous record of 109 goals. The record had stood since 2008, and many thought it would never be broken. But Zlatan shattered it, and he wasn't close to finished. By the time he left PSG, he had scored 156 goals in 180 appearances for the club, an extraordinary strike rate of 0.87 goals per game. It was a record that seemed almost impossible, the kind of consistency that only the very greatest players achieve. His final match at the Parc des Princes against Nantes on May 14, 2016, was pure theater. Before the match, Zlatan posted on Instagram, "I came like a king, left like a legend." It was a statement that perfectly captured his time in Paris, arrogant, accurate, memorable. The match itself was stopped in the 10th minute as 48,000 fans gave Zlatan a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. It was an unprecedented moment, a collective acknowledgement of what he had meant to the club. His 2 sons, Maximilian and Vincent, ran onto the pitch wearing jerseys with King and Legend on the back, a reference to Zlatan's Instagram post. The image of Zlatan with his sons, the crowd applauding, the tears in his eyes, captured the emotion of the moment. This was goodbye, and everyone knew it. PSG won the match 4-0, with Zlatan contributing even in his final appearance. In 4 years at PSG, Zlatan won 12 trophies, including 4 consecutive Ligue 1 titles, 3 French Cups, 3 League Cups, and 3 Champions trophies. He was League One's top scorer 3 times. He transformed PSG from an ambitious project into French football's dominant force. Before Zlatan, PSG was a club with potential. After Zlatan, they were champions, consistent winners who expected to dominate domestically. Paris belonged to Zlatan, and Zlatan belonged to Paris. The relationship between player and city was special. He embraced Parisian culture, learned French, became part of the fabric of the city. Paris, in turn, embraced him with an enthusiasm that surprised even Zlatan. He had been loved at Inter, adored at Milan, but Paris took it to another level. They didn't just appreciate his goals. They celebrated his personality, his confidence, his larger-than-life presence. But at 34, with one major challenge still unmet on his resume, the English Premier League, he set his sights on a reunion with an old friend, Jose Mourinho, now manager of Manchester United. The Premier League was the one major league he hadn't conquered. Critics had long suggested that Zlatan couldn't succeed in England's physical, fast-paced style. At 34, most strikers would be winding down, considering retirement or moves to less competitive leagues. But Zlatan wasn't most strikers. He was heading to Manchester to prove, once again, that he could succeed anywhere. Chapter 11. That goal against England. Before we continue with his club career journey to Manchester United, we must pause to discuss what many consider Zlatan's most iconic moment. November 14, 2012, Sweden versus England at the Friends Arena in Stockholm. This match occurred during his first season at PSG, and it would produce a goal that would define Zlatan's legacy more than perhaps any other single moment in his career. It was an international friendly to inaugurate Sweden's new national stadium, a gleaming 50,000-seat arena that represented Swedish football's ambitions. England arrived as favorites, ranked higher, and possessing more individual talent across their squad. The English media was confident, with some pundits suggesting this would be a comfortable victory. England took a 2-1 lead before halftime through goals from Danny Welbeck and Stephen Coltrane, and some England fans in attendance began sarcastically serenading Zlatan with chants comparing him to Andy Carroll, the English target man. They mocked his ponytail, his perceived ineffectiveness, his inability to impose himself on the match. Their taunts were premature, and they would soon regret every word. The second half began with England still leading 2-1, still looking comfortable, still confident they could see out the match. But in the 77th minute, everything changed. Zlatan received the ball in the penalty area with his back to goal, a defender tight on him. In one motion, he controlled it, turned, and fired a clinical finish past Joe Hart. The match was level at 2-2. The Friends Arena erupted. England's confidence began to waver. Just 7 minutes later, in the 84th minute, Zlatan struck again. A loose ball fell to him about 25 yards from goal. He took one touch to set himself, then hammered a spectacular half-volley that flew past Hart and into the top corner. The goalkeeper had no chance. The power and placement were perfect. Sweden 3, England 2. The comeback was complete. The English fans who had been mocking Zlatan had fallen silent. Those who had compared him to Andy Carroll were eating their words. Then, in the 85th minute, Zlatan scored again. Sweden won a free kick about 30 yards from goal, slightly to the right of center. Zlatan stepped up, and there was a sense of inevitability about what would happen next. He struck the ball with his right foot, curling it over the wall with perfect technique. The ball dipped at exactly the right moment, beating Hart's desperate dive and nestling into the corner of the net. Hat trick complete. Sweden 4, England 2. The stadium was in delirium. Zlatan had single-handedly destroyed England in less than 15 minutes. But Zlatan wasn't finished. The best was yet to come. In the 91st minute, deep into stoppage time, England goalkeeper Joe Hart came rushing out of his penalty area to head clear a Swedish through ball. It was a reasonable decision. The ball was bouncing toward the Swedish attackers, and Hart needed to prevent them from getting to it first. He headed the ball clear, but his clearance didn't travel far. The ball looped high into the air, falling back toward the penalty area about 35 yards from goal. Zlatan, watching Hart's clearance arc toward him, saw his opportunity. The goalkeeper was stranded in no man's land, at least 30 yards from his goal. The net was empty. The angle was impossible. Zlatan had his back to the goal. Any normal player would have controlled the ball, turned, and tried to set up a teammate. But Zlatan wasn't normal, and this wasn't a normal situation. He launched himself into the air, his body parallel to the ground at the peak of his jump, and executed a perfect bicycle kick. His right foot connected with the ball cleanly, sending it in a beautiful parabola back over the scrambling English defenders and the desperately running goalkeeper. The ball seemed to hang in the air forever, the entire stadium holding its breath, time itself seeming to slow down. Then it dropped, perfectly placed into the unguarded net. Goal, Sweden 5, England 2. The stadium exploded. The Swedish players mobbed Zlatan, barely able to believe what they had just witnessed. The English players stood in stunned disbelief. Joe Hart, lying on the ground where he had fallen trying to get back, could only stare at the net. Commentators around the world struggled to find words adequate to describe what had just happened. It wasn't just a goal, it was a work of art, a moment that transcended sport itself. Sweden coach Erik Hamrén was in disbelief in his post-match interview. "I don't know if you will see another like it in your life." Sometimes, when he's doing these things, in training or in matches, you don't think it's possible. Because it's not possible to do that. The fourth goal, for example. It can feel like you are watching a video game. His words captured what everyone was thinking. This shouldn't have been possible. The technique required, the audacity to even attempt it, the perfect execution under pressure in the final minute of an international match, it defied logic. Even England captain Steven Gerrard, one of the Premier League's greatest ever players, later admitted, "It's the best goal I have ever seen." Coming from someone who had seen countless spectacular goals throughout his career, who had played with and against the world's best players, this was the ultimate compliment. If Steven Gerrard called it the best goal he'd ever seen, it was truly something special. The goal won the 2013 FIFA Puskas Award for Goal of the Year, beating competition from other spectacular strikes from around the world. It appeared on highlight reels worldwide, shared millions of times on social media, discussed on every sports program. More than a decade later, people still watch that goal in awe, still struggling to comprehend how it was possible. The distance, the technique, the situation, the importance, everything combined to create a perfect moment. For Zlatan, it was vindication against English skeptics who had long questioned whether he could perform in big moments, whether he could dominate against top opposition. The English media had often been critical of Zlatan, suggesting he was overrated, that he only scored against weak opposition, that he would struggle in the Premier League's physical environment. As he put it after the match, "That's the way it is with the English. If you score against them, you're a good player. If you don't score against them, you're not a good player." Now he had scored 4 goals against them in one match, including one of the greatest goals ever scored. The debate was over. The bicycle kick against England became the defining image of Zlatan's career. The impossible made real. The audacious executed perfectly. It was vintage Zlatan, confident enough to attempt something most players wouldn't even consider, skilled enough to pull it off, dramatic enough to do it in the final minute of a match already won. It was showmanship, yes, but backed by genuine brilliance. It was everything that made Zlatan special, condensed into one perfect moment. Chapter 12. Manchester United and the injury that couldn't end him at 34 years old, having conquered Sweden, the Netherlands, Italy, Spain, and France, Zlatan Ibrahimović joined Manchester United on a free transfer in July 2016. He was reuniting with Jose Mourinho, and the partnership proved as fruitful as their Inter Milan days. Many pundits questioned the signing. Was Zlatan too old? Could his game translate to the Premier League's intensity? Would he struggle with the physical demands? Mourinho ignored the doubters. He knew exactly what Zlatan could still do. Mourinho knew exactly how to use Zlatan. At an age when most strikers are winding down their careers, considering moves to major league soccer or retirement, Zlatan became Manchester United's main man. He wore the number 9 jersey with pride and started delivering immediately. He scored United's winner in the Community Shield against Leicester City on August 7, 2016, announcing his arrival in English football in style. It was a typical Zlatan moment. A big match, a crucial goal, an immediate impact. Throughout the 2016-17 season, Zlatan was magnificent. Despite his age, he was still physically dominant, still technically superb, still utterly confident in his ability to decide matches. He towered over Premier League defenders in aerial duels. His technical ability allowed him to score goals that players half his age couldn't replicate. His experience meant he always seemed to be in the right position at the right time. He scored 17 league goals in 28 appearances, an impressive return for a 35-year-old in his first Premier League season. He scored twice in the EFL Cup final against Southampton at Wembley on February 26, 2017, leading United to a 3-2 victory and his first domestic cup in England. The first goal was a classic Zlatan header, rising above the defense to power home a cross. The second was a brilliant free kick, struck with technique and precision into the corner of the net. At 35, he was still delivering in major finals, still proving his worth in the biggest moments. United also made it to the Europa League final, and Zlatan was pivotal in getting them there. His goals throughout the knockout stages, against Saint-Étienne, Rostov, Anderlecht, and Celta Vigo, carried United forward. In the quarter-final against Anderlecht, with United leading from the first leg, Zlatan scored early in the second leg at Old Trafford. Victory seemed assured. Qualification to the semi-finals appeared certain. United would go on to face Celta Vigo and then hopefully reach the final. But then, in the 87th minute of that match against Anderlecht, disaster struck. As Zlatan chased down a ball in Anderlecht's penalty area, he planted his right foot awkwardly while trying to shield the ball from a defender. His knee buckled unnaturally. He collapsed immediately, clutching his leg. The way he went down, the immediate pain visible on his face, told everyone watching that something was seriously wrong. Players from both teams signaled urgently for medical staff. Zlatan, who had played through countless knocks and injuries throughout his career, knew this was different. Tests confirmed the worst. Zlatan had torn his anterior cruciate ligament and damaged his meniscus. It was a catastrophic knee injury, the kind that had ended many careers. The ACL is one of the crucial ligaments that stabilizes the knee joint, and tearing it requires major surgery and extensive rehabilitation. At 35 years old, with his body already carrying the wear and tear of nearly 2 decades of professional football at the highest level, doctors were uncertain if he would ever play again. Many athletes never fully recover from ACL injuries, especially those in their mid-30s. United won the Europa League final without him, defeating Ajax 2-0 in Stockholm on May 24, 2017, Zlatan's hometown, adding a cruel irony to his absence. It was bittersweet. United claimed a major European trophy and secured Champions League qualification for the following season. But their talisman could only watch from the sidelines, walking on crutches, his right leg in a brace. He had led them there but couldn't finish the job. The trophy presentation must have been painful to watch, his teammates celebrating a success he had been instrumental in achieving but couldn't complete. Zlatan's contract was set to expire at the end of June 2017. The injury meant United released him, though they kept the door open for a potential return if his rehabilitation went well. It was the sensible decision from the club's perspective. They couldn't afford to pay a player who might never return, especially one who was 35 years old. Though for months the football world wondered, was this the end of Zlatan Ibrahimović? Had his last match been that quarter-final against Anderlecht, ending not with glory but with a devastating injury? The answer, predictably, was no. Zlatan attacked his rehabilitation with the same intensity he brought to every challenge in his life. In an Instagram post showing his scarred knee, he declared, "They said it was over. I said no." It became a rallying cry, a statement of defiance against age, injury, and doubt. While other players his age might have accepted retirement gracefully, Zlatan refused. He worked with physiotherapists daily, pushed through painful exercises, rebuilt the strength in his knee one rep at a time. 7 months after the injury, in November 2017, Zlatan returned to Manchester United, coming on as a substitute against Newcastle United on November 25th. The impossible had happened again. A 36-year-old had recovered from a career-threatening ACL injury and returned to play at the highest level of football. Old Trafford erupted when his number came up, the fans giving him a standing ovation as he warmed up and entered the pitch. His return was a triumph of will over circumstance, determination over limitation. United re-signed him to a 1-year deal, recognizing his value both on and off the pitch. But with Romelu Lukaku now the main striker, having been signed from Everton in the summer for $75 million, Zlatan's playing time was limited. He made just 7 more appearances for United, totaling only 176 minutes of football. He struggled to recapture his form, the knee clearly still affecting his movement and explosiveness. His body, remarkable as it was, couldn't quite overcome both age and such a serious injury simultaneously. In March 2018, by mutual agreement, Manchester United and Zlatan parted ways. His time in England had been brief, just 53 matches and 29 goals across all competitions, but impactful. He had proven he could succeed in the Premier League, adding another league to his remarkable collection. He had won 2 trophies, the EFL Cup and Community Shield, and reached a Europa League final. Most importantly, he had shown critics who doubted he could perform in England that he could still dominate at 35 years old. But Zlatan wasn't ready to retire. Instead, he made a decision that surprised many in the football world. At 36 years old, still recovering from a devastating knee injury, he was going to America. Major League Soccer beckoned, and Zlatan saw an opportunity, not just to wind down his career in a less demanding league, but to make an impact, to dominate another league, to prove once more that age was just a number. Chapter 13. The Lion arrives in Los Angeles. On March 23, 2018, Zlatan signed with LA Galaxy in Major League Soccer. The contract was for 2 years with an option for a third, and Zlatan would earn a reported $1.5 million per year in base salary, though endorsements and other bonuses likely made the total package significantly higher. He announced his arrival with typical flair, a full-page advertisement in the Los Angeles Times that simply read, "Dear Los Angeles, you're welcome." It was vintage Zlatan, combining arrogance and charisma in equal measure, generating headlines before he'd even kicked a ball. The advertisement caused exactly the reaction Zlatan intended. Some people loved it. The confidence, the showmanship, the larger-than-life personality arriving in a city known for larger-than-life personalities. Others criticized it as arrogant and disrespectful to MLS and American soccer. Zlatan didn't care about the criticism. He had never cared what critics thought. He was Zlatan Ibrahimović, and he was going to do things his way, just as he always had. His debut came on March 31, 2018, against Los Angeles FC in the derby known as El Tráfico. This was MLS's newest rivalry. LA Galaxy, the league's most successful franchise with 5 MLS Cup titles against Los Angeles FC, the expansion team backed by celebrity owners and building a reputation as the city's hip, modern alternative. The match was at StubHub Center, Galaxy's home stadium, and it was sold out with over 25,000 fans creating an electric atmosphere. Galaxy were losing 3-0 in the second half, and Zlatan was on the bench. He had only been with the team for 8 days, barely trained with his new teammates, and wasn't expected to play significant minutes. As the crowd began chanting, "We want Zlatan," coach Sigi Schmid made the decision. In the 71st minute, with Galaxy needing a miracle, Zlatan entered the game. The stadium erupted. Within minutes, he had changed everything. 6 minutes after coming on, in the 77th minute, Zlatan scored an absolutely outrageous goal. The ball came to him about 40 yards from goal, just inside the LAFC half. Without taking a touch to control it, Zlatan hit a first-time half volley that sailed over LAFC goalkeeper Tyler Miller, who was off his line but not that far off. The ball arced beautifully, dipping at precisely the right moment to drop under the crossbar and into the net. It was an audacious attempt from an absurd distance, but Zlatan made it look almost routine. StubHub Center erupted. The Galaxy faithful couldn't believe what they'd just witnessed. Zlatan had been on the pitch for 6 minutes in his MLS debut, and he'd scored one of the greatest goals in league history. But he wasn't done. Galaxy pushed forward, energized by the goal and Zlatan's presence. LAFC, suddenly nervous, defended deeper. In the 91st minute, deep into stoppage time, a cross came into the LAFC penalty area. Zlatan rose above the defenders and headed home the winner. LA Galaxy had completed an impossible comeback from 3-0 down to 4-3, and Zlatan had scored both goals to seal it. His debut was the stuff of Hollywood, which was fitting given his location. 2 goals, including one from 40 yards, to complete an impossible comeback in his first match. The goal from distance won the 2018 MLS Goal of the Year award. It was his introduction to American soccer, and what an introduction it was. Social media exploded with videos of the goal, viewed millions of times. People who didn't normally watch MLS tuned in to see what Zlatan would do next. In his first season, despite Galaxy missing the playoffs and finishing 8th in the Western Conference, Zlatan scored 22 goals in 27 matches. He was named to the MLS Best XC and won the MLS Newcomer of the Year award. For a 36-year-old coming off a devastating knee injury, it was remarkable. He had adapted to MLS quickly, dominated physically despite the league's younger players, and proven once again that he could succeed anywhere. The 2019 season was even better. Named Galaxy captain, Zlatan took his game to another level. He scored 31 goals in 31 matches, an extraordinary 1-to-1 ratio that few players achieve at any level. His partnership with Mexican winger Cristian Pavón gave Galaxy a dangerous attacking combination. Week after week, Zlatan scored. Sometimes tap-ins, sometimes long-range strikes, sometimes audacious efforts that only he would attempt. A hat-trick against Los Angeles FC on July 19, 2019, saw Zlatan claim to be the best by far, compared to LAFC's star Carlos Vela, who was having an incredible season of his own. Vela would finish with 34 goals and 15 assists, winning the MVP award, but Zlatan's declaration was typical of his personality. He wasn't going to concede superiority to anyone, even when the numbers suggested otherwise. The rivalry between Zlatan and Vela became one of MLS's most compelling storylines, 2 different types of strikers competing for supremacy in Los Angeles. Another hat-trick came against Sporting Kansas City on May 12, 2019, in a remarkable 7-2 victory. Zlatan scored 3, assisted 1, and dominated the match completely. It was the kind of performance that reminded people why he was special, not just the goals, but the complete control he exerted over matches. His third goal that day, a brilliant first-time strike from outside the box, was his 26th league goal of the season, breaking Galaxy's single-season scoring record previously held by Carlos Ruiz. On September 15, 2018, Zlatan scored his 500th career goal for club and country with an acrobatic strike against Toronto FC. The goal was quintessentially Zlatan: difficult, spectacular, memorable. His response afterward captured his personality perfectly. "I'm happy for Toronto because they'll be remembered as my 500th victim." Only Zlatan could turn a milestone into a declaration of dominance over his opponents. The quote went viral, shared across social media as another example of Zlatan's unique personality. He led Galaxy to the playoffs in 2019, their first playoff appearance since 2016. In the first round against Minnesota United, Galaxy won 2-1 on aggregate, with Zlatan scoring and assisting, but they were eliminated in the conference semi-finals by Los Angeles FC, losing 5-3. Despite Zlatan scoring and providing an assist, despite his best efforts, Galaxy fell short. It was a disappointing end to what had been an excellent season personally for Zlatan. Over 2 seasons in MLS, he scored 53 goals in 58 matches, an extraordinary ratio even in a league considered less competitive than Europe's top divisions. His presence had elevated Galaxy's profile, brought attention to MLS, and provided American soccer fans with memories they would cherish. He had proven that even at 38 years old, even after an ACL injury, he could dominate professional football at a high level. In November 2019, Zlatan announced he was leaving Galaxy with a characteristically bold tweet. "You wanted Zlatan, I gave you Zlatan. You are welcome." The story continues. "Now go back to watch baseball." The message was pure Zlatan, arrogant, funny, memorable. He was thanking LA while also taking a shot at American sports culture, suggesting that MLS without him would be less interesting. Galaxy fans were heartbroken but understood. Zlatan had given them 2 incredible years, had broken records, had provided entertainment. Now he was moving on. Many assumed he was heading into retirement. He was 38 years old. He had won titles in 4 major European leagues. He had scored over 500 career goals. He had played in the Premier League, conquered MLS, achieved almost everything possible in football. What else was there to prove? But those who knew Zlatan understood. He wasn't done. He was going home, back to Milan, back to where he had experienced some of his greatest triumphs. AC Milan needed him, and Zlatan needed Milan. The love affair wasn't over. Chapter 14. The Return to Milan. On December 27, 2019, AC Milan announced the signing of Zlatan Ibrahimović on a free transfer. He was 38 years old, an age when most players have long since retired. But Milan desperately needed experience, leadership, and quality. The Rossoneri were struggling, sitting 11th in Serie A at the time of Zlatan's arrival, a far cry from their glory days when they dominated Italian and European football. The club was in crisis, lacking direction, confidence, and quality. When Zlatan arrived, he didn't just bring goals, he brought belief. He made his return debut on January 6, 2020, coming on as a substitute against Sampdoria at San Siro. Milan won 2-0, and suddenly there was hope. The atmosphere in the stadium changed when Zlatan warmed up. Fans who had been frustrated and disappointed suddenly believed again. In his first start, against Cagliari on January 11th, he scored. Against Udinese on January 19th, he scored again. The pattern continued. Zlatan was dragging Milan up the table through sheer will and quality. The statistics from his arrival were remarkable. Before Zlatan's arrival, Milan had averaged 1.06 points per game in the 2019-20 season, struggling in mid-table and looking unlikely to qualify for Europe. With him in the team, they averaged 2.42 points per game, more than double. The transformation was staggering. It wasn't just that Zlatan scored goals, though he did, scoring 10 in 18 Serie A appearances in his first half-season back. It was that his presence changed everything. Young players like Rafael Leão began performing better with Zlatan mentoring them. The team's confidence grew with every match. Opponents respected Milan again, feared coming to San Siro, couldn't just expect easy victories. Zlatan's standards in training pushed everyone to improve. His refusal to accept mediocrity created a culture of excellence. Coach Stefano Pioli often spoke of how Zlatan's presence elevated the entire squad, making average players good and good players great. Milan finished 6th in the 2019-20 season, qualifying for the Europa League. It wasn't a title, but considering where they had been when Zlatan arrived, it was progress. More importantly, there was a sense that Milan was building towards something, that the club was heading in the right direction for the first time in years. Zlatan signed a contract extension to remain for the 2020-21 season, committing to the project. But then COVID-19 struck, pausing football worldwide. When play resumed in June 2020, Milan had to adapt to playing in empty stadiums, with strict protocols, with the constant threat of positive tests disrupting preparations. Zlatan continued where he left off, scoring crucial goals as Milan finished the season strongly. The momentum carried into the 2020-21 campaign. In the 2020-21 season, despite missing several matches due to injury and a COVID-19 infection that sidelined him for weeks, Zlatan scored 15 goals in just 19 Serie A appearances. More importantly, Milan was competing at the top of the table again. For long stretches of the season, they led Serie A, sitting in first place and looking like genuine title contenders. It had been nearly a decade since Milan had challenged for the Scudetto. Zlatan's presence had transformed them from mid-table strugglers to championship contenders. Though Milan ultimately finished second in 2020-21, losing the title to Inter on the final day, the progress was undeniable. They had qualified for the Champions League for the first time since 2013-14. Zlatan, now 39 years old, had scored goals against every opponent, dominated Serie A defenses despite his age, and proven once again that he was special. His goals came in all varieties: headers, volleys, penalties, tap-ins, long-range strikes. Age hadn't diminished his ability to score. The 2021-22 season became Zlatan's crowning achievement in his second Milan stint. Though injuries limited him to just 23 Serie A appearances, and though younger players like Rafael Leão, Theo Hernandez, and goalkeeper Mike Maignan carried much of the scoring and defensive load, his presence, both on and off the pitch, was crucial. Milan was in a title race with their bitter rivals Inter Milan, who were the defending champions. Every match felt vital. Every point mattered. The pressure was immense. Throughout the season, Zlatan's experience proved invaluable. In crucial matches when younger players might have panicked, Zlatan's calm presence steadied the team. His leadership in the dressing room, his demands for excellence in training, his refusal to accept anything less than maximum effort. These intangibles galvanized the entire squad. Coach Stefano Pioli often credited Zlatan with creating the mentality that allowed Milan to compete for the title. The decisive moment came on May 22, 2022, the final day of the Serie A season. Milan traveled to face Sassuolo, needing just a win to secure the Scudetto, their first since 2011, when a younger Zlatan had led them to glory. Inter was playing simultaneously against Sampdoria, and if Milan slipped up, if they drew or lost, Inter could steal the title by winning their own match. The pressure was enormous. Win and become champions, fail and watch your rivals celebrate instead. Zlatan started the match on the bench, his 40-year-old body carefully managed throughout the campaign. Milan went ahead early through Olivier Giroud, the French striker who had been signed to provide goals while Zlatan dealt with injuries. Another Giroud goal made it 2-0, then 3-0. The title was within reach. The decades of struggle, the years of mediocrity, the disappointments, all of it was about to end. When Zlatan was brought on late in the match, in the 78th minute with Milan comfortably ahead, the substitution felt symbolic. The veteran who had sparked this revival, witnessing its completion. He played the final 12 minutes, contributing to Milan seeing out the victory. When the final whistle blew, confirming both Milan's 3-0 victory and Inter's 3-0 win over Sampdoria, Milan's players and staff erupted in celebration. They had done it. They were champions. Tears streamed down Zlatan's face as he celebrated with teammates. This was his 12th major domestic league title across 4 different countries, matching Ryan Giggs's record and surpassing most players in football history. He had returned to save Milan at 38 years old, and 2.5 years later, at 40, he had delivered a championship. It was one of the most remarkable achievements of his career, proving that age truly was just a number when you had the mentality, determination, and quality that Zlatan possessed. The celebration at San Siro when the team returned from Sassuolo was emotional and joyous. Thousands of Milan fans gathered to celebrate their first Scudetto in 11 years. Zlatan, wearing the captain's armband, lifted the trophy alongside his teammates. At 40 years and 7 months old, he was the oldest outfield player to win Serie A since Alessandro Costacurta in 2007. More importantly, he had fulfilled his promise. He had come back to Milan and helped restore them to glory. Chapter 15. The Final Act. The 22-22-23 season would be Zlatan's last as a professional footballer. His body, after decades of elite competition and countless matches at the highest level, was finally breaking down. Knee problems that had plagued him since the ACL injury at Manchester United worsened throughout the campaign. The same knee that he had defied medical expectations to rehabilitate was now limiting his ability to train, to play, to do what he loved most. He managed just 8 appearances across all competitions and scored only 1 goal. Milan, unable to replicate their title-winning form from the previous season, finished 3rd in Serie A behind Napoli and Lazio. Behind the scenes, Zlatan was contemplating his future. Every match became more difficult, every training session more painful. He consulted with doctors, physiotherapists, and medical experts about his knee. The consensus was clear. He could continue playing, but at significant risk and with diminishing returns. His body had given him everything, had carried him through an extraordinary career, but now it was telling him that time was running out. He had achieved everything a footballer could achieve. He had won titles in the Netherlands, Italy twice with different clubs, Spain and France. He had scored over 570 career goals for club and country. He had represented Sweden 121 times, becoming their all-time leading scorer with 62 international goals. On June 4, 2023, at a press conference at San Siro with his family present, Zlatan announced his retirement from professional football. The man who had always projected supreme confidence, who had famously compared himself to God, who had never shown weakness or vulnerability in public, broke down in tears. Emotions overwhelmed him as he tried to speak. His wife Helena stood beside him, supportive. His sons, now teenagers, watched their father show a side of himself they rarely saw, the human beneath the bravado, the man beneath the myth. The time has come to say, "Goodbye to football, but not to you," he told Milan fans, his voice breaking with emotion. "I want to thank my family, who have given me the opportunity to play football for so many years. I want to thank my teammates, all the coaches I have had, my agent Mino. I miss you." Mino Raiola, Zlatan's agent and friend for his entire career, had passed away in April 2022, and the loss was still raw. Raiola had been more than an agent. He had been a confidant, a protector, a partner in building Zlatan's career and legacy. I want to thank the opposing teams who gave me adrenaline, Zlatan continued, wiping tears from his eyes. Thank you, Milan. Forever. You gave me so much happiness in this second part. I didn't think I could play at these levels, but you made me feel alive again. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, AC Milan, forever. The words were heartfelt, genuine, showing a side of Zlatan that contrasted with his public persona. This wasn't Zlatan the showman, this was Zlatan the man, grateful and emotional at the end of an incredible journey. Milan owner Jerry Cardinale, standing beside him, hinted at a future role. We want Zlatan to be part of AC Milan for many years to come. This is not goodbye. This is just the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Zlatan's journey with Milan continues. The statement suggested that while Zlatan's playing career was ending, his relationship with the club would continue in a different capacity. His final match, his 163rd appearance for Milan across both stints, had come on June 3, 2023, against Hellas Verona. He entered as a substitute to a standing ovation from the San Siro crowd. Every fan in the stadium was on their feet, applauding, chanting his name, showing their appreciation for what he had given them. Milan won 3-1, and afterward, Zlatan bid farewell to San Siro, walking around the pitch, soaking in the adulation one last time. He applauded all four sides of the stadium, tears in his eyes, knowing this was the last time he would play at the ground that had become his home. The retirement wasn't long-lived, however, at least not his involvement with football. In December 2023, just 6 months after hanging up his boots, AC Milan announced that Zlatan Ibrahimović would return to the club as a senior advisor and operating partner of Redbird Capital Partners, Milan's ownership group. He would work on sporting operations, guiding Milan's strategy, player recruitment, and overall direction. The announcement was met with excitement from Milan fans. Zlatan would still be part of the club, still influencing decisions, still demanding excellence. It was a role that suited him perfectly. He had always been a leader, always someone who demanded excellence from himself and others. Now he could shape Milan's future from the boardroom rather than the pitch. His experience, his connections throughout world football, his understanding of what makes a winning team, all of these assets could benefit. Milan in his new role, the Lion hadn't left San Siro. He had simply changed his position. Chapter 16. The Swedish Record and International Career. While Zlatan's club career was extraordinary and well documented, his international career with Sweden deserves its own chapter. He made his debut for the Swedish national team on January 31, 2001, at just 19 years old, in a friendly against the Faroe Islands. It was the beginning of a 22-year international career that would see Zlatan become synonymous with Swedish football. Over those 22 years, Zlatan would represent his country in 2 FIFA World Cups, 2002 and 2006, and 4 UEFA European Championships, 2004, 2008, 2012, and 2016. Despite Sweden's limited resources compared to football's powerhouse nations like Brazil, Germany, France, and Spain, Zlatan carried them to several major tournaments through sheer individual brilliance. He was Sweden's talisman, their best player, their leader, and often the only world-class talent in the squad. At Euro 2004 in Portugal, a young Zlatan scored a stunning back-heel goal against Italy in the group stage, one of the tournament's most memorable moments. Receiving the ball in the penalty area with his back to goal, Zlatan flicked it behind him with his heel, catching Italian goalkeeper Gianluigi Buffon completely off guard. The ball rolled into the net, and Zlatan celebrated wildly. Though Sweden was eventually eliminated in the quarter-finals by the Netherlands on penalties, Zlatan had announced himself on the international stage. He was 22 years old and already showing the audacity that would define his career. The 2006 World Cup in Germany saw Sweden advance from their group, which included England, Paraguay, and Trinidad and Tobago. Zlatan contributed one goal in the tournament, a header against Paraguay, but his presence elevated the entire team. Sweden reached the round of 16 before being eliminated 2-0 by the hosts Germany, who would eventually finish third. It was a respectable showing for a Swedish team that exceeded expectations. Euro 2008 in Austria and Switzerland was disappointing. Sweden failed to advance from the group stage, finishing last in a group with Spain, Russia, and Greece. Zlatan scored one goal against Greece, but couldn't prevent Sweden's elimination. It was a frustrating tournament for him personally, as he was now established as one of the world's best strikers, but couldn't translate that success to the international stage. The 2010 World Cup in South Africa saw Sweden fail to qualify, losing in the playoffs to Portugal. Zlatan scored in both legs, but couldn't prevent Sweden from missing the tournament. It was a bitter disappointment. The World Cup is football's biggest stage, and Zlatan wanted to showcase his talents there. Missing the tournament entirely was painful for both him and Swedish fans. Euro 2012 in Poland and Ukraine was more successful. Sweden finished second in their group behind France, earning a place in the quarter-finals. Zlatan was in brilliant form, scoring twice against France, including a beautiful volley. But in the quarter-finals, England eliminated Sweden 3-2 in a match that featured that incredible bicycle kick goal in the friendly match later that year. The tournament showed Zlatan at his best internationally, carrying Sweden, scoring crucial goals, performing on the big stage. The 2014 World Cup in Brazil saw another heartbreaking failure to qualify. Sweden lost in the playoffs to Portugal again, with Cristiano Ronaldo scoring a hat-trick in the second leg. Zlatan was devastated. Once again, he would miss football's biggest tournament. His international career was becoming defined by what he couldn't achieve rather than what he did achieve, at least in terms of tournament success. Perhaps Zlatan's finest international performance came during the Euro 2016 qualifying campaign. At 33, with many assuming his international career was winding down, Zlatan scored 11 goals in the qualifying stages, single-handedly dragging Sweden toward qualification. His performances were heroic. Match after match, he scored the goals Sweden needed, carried them when they struggled, refused to let them fail. They reached the playoffs, but eventually lost to Denmark, missing the tournament. Despite the failure to qualify, Zlatan's individual performances were extraordinary. After Euro 2016, where Sweden had eventually qualified but was eliminated in the group stage after finishing third behind Italy and Belgium, Zlatan announced his retirement from international football. He had scored 62 goals in 116 appearances, both records for Sweden. He had given everything to the national team, had carried them for over a decade, but major international silverware had eluded him. Many assumed they had seen the last of Zlatan in a Swedish jersey. The chapter was closed, but in March 2021, at 39 years old, Zlatan made a stunning return to the national team for World Cup qualifying. Sweden coach Janne Andersson had reached out, and Zlatan answered the call. After nearly 5 years in retirement from international duty, he was back wearing the yellow and blue. The announcement shocked the football world. Players don't typically return to international football at 39, especially after retiring 5 years earlier. But Zlatan wasn't typical. He played in the Euro 2020 tournament, which was held in 2021 due to COVID-19, and continued appearing for Sweden in World Cup qualifiers. His performances were solid, if not spectacular. He was 39-40 years old, competing against players half his age. But his experience, his leadership, his ability to mentor younger players like Alexander Isak and Dejan Kulusevski made him valuable beyond just goals. His final international appearance came on September 5, 2022, in a Nations League match against Slovenia. At 40 years and 336 days old, he became the oldest player to ever appear for Sweden, breaking the previous record. He retired internationally for good shortly after, with his legacy secure. 121 caps and 62 goals, both Swedish records that may stand for generations. Despite his incredible individual achievements, major international silverware eluded Zlatan. Sweden never won a World Cup or European Championship during his career. They never even reached a semi-final of a major tournament with him in the squad. It remains the one significant gap in his trophy cabinet, but it's a gap shared by countless all-time greats who played for smaller nations. George Best never played in a World Cup. Ryan Giggs never played in one either. Zlatan's inability to win a major international tournament doesn't diminish his greatness. It simply highlights the reality that individual brilliance can only carry a team so far. What Zlatan did achieve was elevating Swedish football's profile globally. For 2 decades, he was Swedish football. Every Swedish child growing up in the 2000s and 2010s wanted to be Zlatan. He inspired a generation of Swedish players who are now starring in top European leagues: Alexander Isak at Newcastle, Dejan Kulusevski at Tottenham, Victor Lindelof at Manchester United, and many others. They all grew up watching Zlatan, learning from Zlatan, dreaming of emulating Zlatan. His impact on Swedish football extends far beyond his own achievements. Chapter 17. The Numbers and the Records. When you examine Zlatan Ibrahimovic's career statistics in detail, the numbers are staggering and tell the story of one of football's most prolific goalscorers. Club career: over 570 goals in approximately 950 appearances across all competitions. He scored for every major club he played for: Malmö FF, Ajax, Juventus, Inter Milan, Barcelona, AC Milan, Paris Saint-Germain, Manchester United, and LA Galaxy. His consistency across different leagues, different tactical systems, different countries, and different stages of his career was remarkable. League titles: 13 major. Domestic league championships: 1 Eredivisie with Ajax in 2001-02 and 2003-04, 3 Serie A titles with Inter Milan in 2006-07, 2007-08, and 2008-09, 1 La Liga with Barcelona in 2009-10, 1 Serie A title with AC Milan in 2010-11, 4 League One titles with PSG from 2012-13 to 2015-16, and 1 Serie A title in his second stint with AC Milan in 2021-22. At the time of his retirement, he was one of only a handful of players to win league titles in 4 different European countries. Cup competitions: 5 domestic cups across different countries, 4 French League Cups, 4 French Champions trophies, 1 Dutch Cup with Ajax, 1 Italian Supercoppa, 2 English Cups, Community Shield and EFL Cup, and 1 UEFA Europa League with Manchester United. His trophy cabinet contained 31 major honors, an extraordinary haul that few players in history can match. Individual awards: 11-time Swedish Footballer of the Year, a record that will likely never be broken. 3-time League One Player of the Year, multiple inclusions in UEFA Teams of the Year and FIFPro World UXEs, winner of the Guldbollen, Swedish football's highest individual honor, a record 12 times. Serie A top scorer in 2008-09 and 2011-12, League One top scorer in 2012-13, 2013-14, and 2015-16. International: 121 caps for Sweden, 62 goals. Sweden's all-time leading scorer and most capped outfield player. 4th in the list of European international goal scorers, behind only Cristiano Ronaldo, Ferenc Puskás, and Miroslav Klose at the time of his retirement from international football. Age-defying longevity. At 41 years old when he retired, Zlatan was still playing at the highest level. He won a Serie A title at 40 years old. Very few players have maintained elite performance into their 40s. Stanley Matthews played until 50, but in a different era. In the modern game, with its intensity and physical demands, playing at the top level past 35 is rare. Past 40 is almost unprecedented. But beyond the numbers, Zlatan's impact on football was cultural and psychological. He changed how athletes could present themselves, how they could embrace confidence without apology. In Sweden, a country known for its principle of jantelagen, the law of Jante, which discourages standing out or claiming superiority, Zlatan was revolutionary. He refused to be humble when he didn't feel humble. He refused to downplay his achievements to make others comfortable. He was unapologetically himself, and millions of people around the world resonated with that authenticity. Chapter 18. The Personality and the Philosophy. Zlatan Ibrahimovic's personality was as much a part of his legend as his goals. His confidence bordered on arrogance, but it was rooted in genuine self-belief earned through overcoming enormous obstacles. From the rough streets of Rosengård to the pinnacle of world football, Zlatan never forgot where he came from, and he never let anyone make him feel inferior. His quotes became legendary, often shared on social media and repeated by fans worldwide. They weren't just funny or arrogant. They revealed his philosophy, his approach to life and football. When asked if he was nervous before a big match, lions don't compare themselves to humans. It captured his mentality. He saw himself as operating on a different level, above the normal concerns and fears that affected others. On his impact and self-assessment, I can't help but laugh at how perfect I am. To most people, this would sound absurdly arrogant. But for Zlatan, it was confidence earned through achievement. He had proven himself repeatedly, and he wasn't going to pretend otherwise. On his arrival and departure from PSG, I came like a king, left like a legend. It was the perfect summary of his time in Paris: confident arrival, legendary departure, achievements that backed up the bravado. When asked about winning the Ballon d'Or, "I'm the Zlatan. I don't need the Ballon d'Or to validate my career." While winning football's highest individual honor would have been nice, Zlatan genuinely didn't need external validation. He knew his worth, knew his achievements, and didn't require awards to prove anything. On age and retirement, age is just a number. It's totally irrelevant unless, of course, you're a bottle of wine. He proved this throughout his late career resurgence, playing at the highest level into his 40s when most strikers had long since retired. After scoring 4 goals against England, including the bicycle kick, one thing is for sure: a World Cup without me is nothing to watch. It was classic Zlatan, bold, provocative, designed to generate reactions. But there was truth in it. His absence from the 2010 and 2014 World Cups did make those tournaments less interesting from a pure entertainment perspective. On his philosophy and destiny, "I decide my future. I am my destiny." This encapsulated his entire approach to life, refusing to be limited by circumstances, background, or other people's expectations. He made his own path, created his own opportunities, shaped his own story. Perhaps his most famous quote came when discussing his personal growth: "I think I'm like wine. The older I get, the better I get." He proved this repeatedly, particularly in his late 30s and early 40s when many assumed he was finished. Some interpreted these quotes as arrogance or ego. Zlatan saw them differently. They were armor, confidence built from surviving a childhood that could have destroyed him. When you've overcome poverty, family instability, discrimination, and being written off by society, why would you downplay your achievements? When you've proven yourself in every major league, scored over 570 goals, won 31 trophies, and inspired millions, why would you pretend to be humble about it? His autobiography, I Am Zlatan Ibrahimovic, co-written with Swedish author David Lagercrantz, became an international bestseller. Published in 2011, it painted a raw, honest picture of his upbringing in Rosengård, his struggles adapting to Swedish football culture, and his rise to stardom. The book was brutally honest about his conflicts with coaches like Pep Guardiola, his feuds with teammates, and his unapologetic self-belief. It became one of the best-selling sports autobiographies ever written, translated into multiple languages and giving readers insight into the man behind the persona. Critics called him egotistical, arrogant, difficult. Fans called him confident, authentic, inspirational. Zlatan called himself Zlatan, and somehow that said everything. He never tried to be anyone else, never conformed to expectations, never apologized for who he was. In an era of media-trained athletes giving bland, safe answers, Zlatan was refreshingly real. Chapter 19. The Legacy and Impact. When Zlatan Ibrahimović retired in 2023, he left behind a legacy that few players could match. He had conquered multiple leagues, scored goals that people will watch for decades, and built a personal brand that transcended football. For Swedish football, his impact cannot be overstated. He put Swedish football on the global map in a way no player had since the days of Henrik Larsson in the late 1990s and early 2000s. Young Swedish players growing up in the Zlatan era had a role model who showed that even if you came from difficult circumstances, even if you didn't fit the traditional Swedish mold, you could become one of the world's best. The generation of Swedish players now succeeding in top European leagues, Isak, Kulusevski, Forsberg, Lindelöf, and many others, all cite Zlatan as an inspiration. A statue of Zlatan was erected outside the Friends Arena in Stockholm in October 2019, immortalizing his contributions to Swedish football. The statue depicted Zlatan in his iconic arms-wide celebration pose. However, when Zlatan announced he was buying a stake in Hammarby ÖF, a Stockholm-based rival of his boyhood club, Malmö FF, angry Malmö fans vandalized the statue repeatedly. They sawed off the nose, set it on fire, knocked it over. The statue became a symbol of the complicated relationship between Zlatan and parts of Swedish football culture. It was eventually moved to Malmö in 2024, where it now stands outside Stadion Football Arena. Even in controversy, Zlatan remained a figure people cared deeply about. For world football, Zlatan represented something important. The idea that personality and individuality could coexist with team success. In an era where athletes were often media-trained to give bland, safe answers, Zlatan was refreshingly authentic. He said what he thought. He backed up his words with performances. He never apologized for being himself. This authenticity resonated with millions of fans worldwide who were tired of cookie-cutter athlete personalities. His influence extended beyond football into popular culture. He became a global brand, endorsing products from Nike to Volvo to Xbox. His larger-than-life persona made him marketable in ways most footballers weren't. In 2014, Sweden even named a new species of fish after him, Salmonthamus Zlatan, in recognition of his achievements. It was a bizarre honor, but somehow fitting for someone as unique as Zlatan. Zlatan also became a symbol for immigrant communities across Europe. His success as the son of Balkan immigrants in Sweden resonated with millions who faced similar challenges. He never forgot his roots in Rosengård, often speaking about how his background shaped him. In a football world sometimes marked by racism and xenophobia, Zlatan's unapologetic embrace of his heritage mattered. He showed immigrant children across Europe that they could succeed at the highest level while remaining proud of where they came from. His post-playing career with AC Milan as a senior advisor shows that his impact on football continues. In boardrooms and training grounds, his standards and expectations are shaping the next generation of Milan players. Milan's transfer decisions, tactical approaches, and organizational culture all bear his influence. The lion still roars, just in a different way. The debates about Zlatan's place in football history will continue. Why did he never win the Ballon d'Or despite his achievements? Could he have succeeded at Barcelona if circumstances were different? Was he a big game player, or did he fall short in the most crucial moments? How does he compare to other great strikers of his generation like Luis Suarez, Robert Lewandowski, and Sergio Aguero. These debates are part of what makes his career so compelling. He wasn't a simple story with easy answers. He was complex, controversial, brilliant, and flawed. He was human, despite sometimes claiming otherwise. He won 31 trophies, but never the Champions League. He scored over 570 goals, but never in a World Cup knockout stage. He dominated multiple leagues, but struggled at Barcelona. These contradictions don't diminish his greatness. They make him more interesting, more real, more relatable. Chapter 20. Conclusion: The Boy from Rosengård. So what do we make of Zlatan Ibrahimović? How do we summarize a career so vast, a personality so large, a legacy so complex? Perhaps we shouldn't try to summarize him at all. Perhaps Zlatan resists simple categorization precisely because he was never simple. He was a contradiction, arrogant yet vulnerable, confident yet insecure about his background, tough yet emotional. He was the kid from Rosengård who conquered Europe, the immigrant's son who became Sweden's greatest footballer, the self-proclaimed god who cried at his retirement. What's undeniable is his impact. 13 league titles across 4 countries, over 570 career goals, moments of magic that will be replayed for generations, the solo goal against NAC Breda, the bicycle kick against England, the 40-yard volley on his MLS debut, a personality that transcended sport, a journey from poverty to legend that inspired millions. He changed how footballers could present themselves. He showed that confidence and swagger, if backed by performance, could be embraced rather than hidden. He proved that football's greatest players didn't all have to come from La Masia or Manchester United's academy, that a kid from a rough neighborhood in Malmö could become one of the world's best through talent, determination, and unshakable self-belief. For every goal he scored, and there were many, he created a story. The bicycle kick remains the most spectacular, but there were hundreds of others. The back heel against Italy in Euro 2004, the free kick to complete his hat trick against England, the header to win the EFL Cup for Manchester United, the goals that won Serie A titles for Inter, Milan, and PSG. Each goal added to the legend, each moment reinforced his status as something special. In Rosengård, where it all began, Zlatan's story offers hope. It says that your circumstances don't define your ceiling, that if you're talented enough, hungry enough, and bold enough to be yourself, you can achieve the impossible. It's not a promise that everyone from Rosengård will become Zlatan, but it's proof that someone can. For every kid playing football on concrete pitches in immigrant neighborhoods across Europe, Zlatan's story says, you can make it. Your background doesn't limit you. Your dreams are valid. I came like a king, left like a legend, Zlatan said when leaving PSG. It's the perfect summary of not just his Paris career, but his entire journey. He arrived in world football as if he belonged at the top, before he'd proven anything. And he left as a legend, having proven everything. The bicycle kick against England will be remembered long after all of us are gone. Children not yet born will watch that goal and feel the same awe we felt watching it live. They'll ask, how did he do that? And the answer, as it always has been, will be simple. He's Zlatan Ibrahimović, from a broken home in Rosengård to the pinnacle of world football, from stealing bikes to scoring bicycle kicks, from being told he'd never make it to becoming one of the greatest strikers in football history. Zlatan's journey is about more than football. It's about refusing to accept limitations, about believing in yourself when no one else does, about turning adversity into fuel for greatness. He didn't just play football, he conquered it. He bent it to his will. He made it his own. And in doing so, he gave us moments, memories, and inspiration that will endure long after the final whistle of his career has blown. That's what Zlatan does. That's what Zlatan is. That's what Zlatan will always be. A legend, a king, an inspiration, a boy from Rosengård who showed the world that anything is possible. The end.